Now that the project has failed, mourn, pack your things, and never come back here again. That sentence didn't just cut through the room, it cut through me. My palms were sweating so hard I could barely grip the pen I was holding. I wanted to shout, to throw the truth back at my boss in front of everyone, to demand that she admit what she had done. But instead, I just sat there, staring at the conference table as if it could swallow me whole. And maybe it already had. Hi. My name doesn't matter right now because if you've ever worked under someone who could destroy a year of your life in a single sentence, you already know me. I'm the one who gave everything for a project that was supposed to be our flagship, the one that stayed late when everyone else clocked out, the one who thought loyalty mattered. I'm the one who got crushed in a boardroom ambush. If you're listening to this, do me a favor. Stick with me until the end before you decide whether I was weak, naive, or reckless. Because this story isn't about failure. It's about betrayal, survival, and what happens when someone in power thinks they can rewrite reality. And yes, karma does show up. Let me start with the moment that changed everything. We were in the big glass-walled meeting room on the 14th floor, the kind with a skyline view that looks more expensive than anything inside it. My boss, a woman whose heels always clicked like gunfire down the hallway, had gathered the entire project team and several executives. The demo had crashed, not because of me, not because of my team, but because she had quietly swapped out the stable build for a version no one had vetted. And when it all went up in smoke, she looked straight at me, like she'd been waiting for this moment. Now that the project has failed, mourn, pack your things, and never come back here again. She smiled, as if humiliation was part of the agenda. There was a silence after that, the kind that makes your ears ring. No one defended me, no one asked questions. People shuffled their notes, avoided eye contact, acted like I'd just vanished. And I realized the decision had been made long before that meeting. I was the scapegoat. I remember walking out, my legs shaking but my back straight. I didn't cry. Not yet. I didn't scream. Not yet. I just pressed the elevator button and watched my reflection in the steel doors, wondering how a year of 80-hour weeks could collapse into nothing. But here's the thing, no one in that room knew. I had the receipts. I had every email, every ticket, every log. And I had one more thing, a quiet, stubborn refusal to let her version of the story become the truth. So yeah, my boss thought she'd buried me with one line. But what she really did was give me a reason to dig. And if you want to hear how that dig turned into the kind of revenge that corporate tyrants never see coming, stick with me. Drop a like if this already hooked you. Subscribe if you want to hear the full story. And tell me in the comments. What city are you listening from? Because this one's going global. When people hear stories like mine, they always ask, didn't you see the warning signs? And the truth is, yes, I did. But the problem with red flags is that when you're desperate to make something work, you convince yourself they're just decorations. From the outside, our project looked like a dream gig. Multi-million-dollar client, high visibility, the kind of assignment that could make or break careers. I was the project lead, not the highest rank in the company, but enough responsibility to feel like every success or failure had my name stamped on it. I wanted to prove myself, badly. My boss? Let's call her Miranda. She thrived on theater. Every Monday she'd sweep into the office with her latte the size of a toddler, clicking those lethal heels down the hallway, and announce that this week we were making history. She loved big phrases, loved declaring deadlines as do or die, even when she was the one constantly shifting them. The first real crack appeared about 3 months in. We'd just wrapped a sprint, and my team stayed late to get the build polished. The client was thrilled. They even wrote an email praising the functionality. I forwarded it to Miranda, hoping she'd share the good news. Instead, she replied with one line. Don't get comfortable. I've already promised more features for the same deadline. That was her style. Move the goalpost, then act like you were lazy for not predicting it. Another time, during a stakeholder call, she muted herself, but forgot the camera was still on. We watched her roll her eyes as I explained a workaround. Then she unmuted and said, "Yes, exactly what I was going to suggest." The clients nodded, and I bit my tongue. I told myself it didn't matter who got the credit, as long as the work survived. But the biggest red flag? The budgets. I'd noticed a line item tucked into our financial tracker. Temporary vendor services. It was vague, unassigned, but pulling thousands each week. When I asked, Miranda brushed it off. "Just background support. Don't worry your pretty little head about it." Pretty little head? She actually said that. My stomach turned, but I didn't push harder. I was already juggling 12-hour days, managing devs in 3 time zones, and patching bugs at 2 a.m. The last thing I wanted was to sound paranoid. Still, my team noticed things. One of the junior engineers, let's call him Jay, confided that his code review had been bypassed on a module that later crashed. He swore he hadn't approved it. When we dug deeper, the approval had Miranda's credentials attached. She laughed it off as a system glitch. But glitches don't sign their names with timestamps at 3:14 a.m. Here's the part that still makes my chest tighten when I think about it. My team trusted me. They worked themselves raw because they believed in me, not her. They believed in the project. When people skipped birthdays, anniversaries, even a funeral, they didn't do it because Miranda barked an order. They did it because I asked them to hang on a little longer, and I carried that weight like a badge until the day it was turned into a noose. The irony is that for all her talk about efficiency, Miranda loved appearances more than results. She ordered branded water bottles for client visits, while our testing servers ran out of storage. She demanded color-coded Gantt charts while ignoring warnings that integrations weren't ready. She was staging a play, and we were the unpaid actors. Looking back, I should have walked away, should have seen the setup forming. But when you're in the thick of it, exhaustion feels like loyalty, and silence feels like professionalism. So I kept my head down. I patched code, soothed clients, sent late-night Slack messages that ended with, "We'll figure it out." I believed if we just pushed through, the work would speak for itself. I didn't realize Miranda had already started writing a different script, one where the failure was inevitable, and where my name was already penciled in as the villain. And that's how we got to the demo day, the ambush, the line that still echoes in my skull. But before I tell you about the trap she set, you need to know what happened in the weeks leading up to it, because that's where the knife was sharpened. The week before the demo, the office felt like a pressure cooker. Everyone was on edge, barely sleeping, chugging coffee like it was oxygen. We'd finally stabilized the build. Weeks of bug squashing, integration fixes, and last-minute patches had pulled it together. My team, exhausted but proud, was convinced we could walk into that meeting and impress the client. But something felt off. Miranda was too calm, too smug. She stopped nitpicking code commits and didn't barrage me with midnight Slack messages. Instead, she spent her time in executive syncs, which she never invited me to. She smiled a little too much in the hallway. It was the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. I should have known. On the morning of the demo, I arrived early to triple-check everything. My team and I loaded the stable build, ran a smoke test, green across the board. We even celebrated with stale vending machine muffins. At 10 a.m., the execs and clients filed into the glass-walled conference room. I can still hear the scrape of chairs, the clink of coffee mugs, the artificial cheer in everyone's voices. Miranda stood at the head of the table, all confidence. "Today," she said, "we'll see the culmination of months of hard work. Our lead has prepared a build that represents the best of what we can deliver." She gestured toward me like a ringmaster presenting a performer. I plugged in, launched the demo, and within 30 seconds, it collapsed. Login screens froze. Buttons triggered nothing. Data wouldn't load. The system hung so badly, I had to hard reboot the laptop. I felt my stomach drop. My hands went cold. This wasn't the build we tested. "Try again," Miranda said sweetly. I did. Same result. Error after error, like the system had rotted overnight. The room went silent except for the whir of the projector fan. The clients frowned. An executive coughed into his fist. And Miranda, she leaned back in her chair, crossed her legs, and delivered the line she'd been rehearsing. Now that the project has failed, mourn, pack your things, and never come back here again. People laughed nervously as if she were joking, but she wasn't. Her eyes locked on mine, sharp and unblinking. She wanted me gone. She wanted me branded as the failure. I knew then what she'd done. She had swapped the build. Our stable version replaced with the unreviewed experimental one she'd forced through weeks earlier, the one with her approval credentials. She'd set me up in front of the exact people whose trust I had fought to earn. I looked around the table, desperate for someone to speak up. My team avoided my eyes. The execs scribbled in their notebooks. No one said a word. Humiliation is a strange feeling. It's not just pain. It's heat crawling up your neck, the sound of your pulse in your ears, the desperate wish to disappear. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to stay quiet. If I screamed, if I begged, if I broke down, she'd win twice. So I didn't fight. Not then. I closed the laptop, unplugged the cables, and stood up. My legs felt like they were moving through mud, but I walked to the door, back straight, eyes forward. The silence followed me out, heavy and suffocating. In the elevator, I caught my reflection in the mirrored wall. Pale face, trembling hands, tie slightly crooked. I didn't look like a project lead who had just lost everything. I looked like someone who had just witnessed a crime, because that's what it was. A crime. A setup so clean it left no blood, only paperwork and humiliation. And in that moment, as the elevator descended, I made a choice. I wasn't going to fight in her arena, under her rules, in a room stacked with her allies. No, I was going to fight on my own terms. And the first step was simple. I had to prove to myself, to my team, and to anyone who cared to see, that what happened in that room was not failure. It was sabotage. The first week after the demo was a blur. The kind of blur where days bleed into nights, and the only proof time is moving forward, is the growing stack of unopened bills on your kitchen counter. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, replaying the humiliation in my head like a cruel highlight reel. The line, mourn, pack your things, and never come back here again, looped until it felt like my own brain was mocking me. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in that room, back at that table, back at the moment everything crashed. I didn't post anything online. No vague moving on to the next adventure LinkedIn update. No taking some time to myself Instagram caption. Just silence. Because how do you package public betrayal into a cheerful announcement? The truth was, I was terrified. Rent was due in 3 weeks. My savings account looked like a bad joke. I'd been so wrapped up in the project that I hadn't lined up any safety net. And now with my reputation shredded, who would even take a chance on me? On day 3, I finally opened my laptop, not to job hunt. I didn't have the energy for that yet, but to sift through the wreckage. I pulled up version histories, commit logs, email chains. My hands trembled as I clicked through them, but the pattern was there. The swapped build had Miranda's fingerprints all over it. Timestamps, credentials, approvals at hours no one else was online. And yet staring at the evidence, I felt small. What was I going to do, march into HR with a folder and demand justice? HR worked for her, not me. The panic built until it was a constant hum in my chest. I started drinking too much coffee, then wine at night, just to take the edge off. Neither helped. My apartment turned into a mess, dishes piled in the sink, unopened mail scattered across the counter, blinds shut against the daylight. I avoided calls from my family. I didn't want to hear the disappointment in their voices. Then out of nowhere came the first crack of light. Jay, the junior engineer who'd once complained about his code review being bypassed, sent me a message. He said he'd been poking around after I left and noticed something strange. Our code signing certificates had been bypassed. Not by accident, not by glitch. At Miranda's request. He didn't have much, but he had a snippet of an internal chat log where she pressured a vendor to fast-track deployment without standard checks. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was a thread. The next day, another lifeline. A friend I'd gone to grad school with, now working in compliance, reached out after hearing I'd been let go. I admitted in halting sentences what had happened. Instead of pity, she gave me something better. Advice. Document everything, she said. Chain of custody matters. Don't edit. Don't delete. Just preserve. She connected me with an employment attorney she trusted. On the call, my voice shook, but I laid out the story. He listened quietly, then said something I'll never forget. You're not crazy. This isn't just office politics. It's retaliation. And if you've got the logs, you've got leverage. For the first time in days, my lungs expanded fully. I wasn't insane. I wasn't weak. I was a target, and targets can fight back. That night, I sat at my desk until dawn, organizing files into folders, backing them up on encrypted drives, writing notes to myself so the timeline wouldn't blur. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't even hopeful yet. But it was a start. I wasn't just mourning anymore. I was preparing. If part 4 was the collapse, part 5 was the rebuild. Not of my career yet, but of my sanity. Because once I stopped replaying the humiliation and started treating it like evidence, the noise in my head quieted. The first thing I did was build a timeline. Every email, every Slack thread, every commit log went into a single document. Dates, times, participants. At first it looked chaotic, a mess of attachments and links. But patterns emerged quickly. Take the night before the demo. The stable build was tagged at 11:42 p.m., signed off by me and Jay. At 3:14 a.m., a new build appeared in the repo. Unstable, unreviewed, carrying Miranda's approval credentials. There it was, in black and white. She had overridden the release after we'd gone home. I highlighted it in yellow. First, anchor. Next, the budget anomaly. That vague, temporary vendor services line had been bothering me for months. With my compliance friend's coaching, I requested archived invoices. Buried inside was an LLC name I didn't recognize. A quick search later, I realized it was registered to Miranda's cousin at a residential address. Thousands of dollars funneled out under consulting. Consulting that, as far as my team knew, never happened. Yellow highlight, second anchor. Then came the performance memo. 2 days after the demo, I was emailed a formal HR letter stating I'd been terminated for failure to meet delivery obligations. Attached was a memo allegedly written 2 months earlier, documenting ongoing concerns with my leadership. Except the metadata told a different story. The file had been created and last modified the same morning as the demo. Someone had backdated it. Sloppy. Yellow highlight, third anchor. Piece by piece, the puzzle stopped being a fog of paranoia and became a story, one I could actually prove. Meanwhile, my attorney kept me grounded. Don't get emotional in your notes, he warned. Judges and regulators don't care about feelings. They care about facts, dates, signatures, timestamps. It was brutal advice, but necessary. So I stripped the drama out of my documents and left only the evidence. My humiliation became bullet points. My insomnia became line items. And allies started to appear. A QA lead who'd been silent in the demo quietly sent me screenshots showing test cases had passed before the build swap. A vendor engineer forwarded me an email thread where Miranda pushed for bypassing red tape to hit an artificial milestone. Even a client-side contact reached out, confused why the version they'd seen weeks earlier was stable, but the demo collapsed. None of them wanted to go public, not yet. Fear kept them cautious, but they trusted me enough to share breadcrumbs. And breadcrumbs, when collected carefully, turn into a trail. The emotional toll was still heavy. I'd sit at my desk until 2 a.m., my eyes burning from screen glare, a glass of water going warm beside me. Sometimes I'd hear Miranda's voice in my head, sneering, "Mourn, pack, never come back." But instead of curling up under the weight of it, I'd click back into my spreadsheet and highlight another line. Each piece of proof was a counterweight against that humiliation. By the end of the week, my evidence master folder had grown into a fortress. Commit logs with version hashes, email headers proving late-night overrides, screenshots from QA, invoices linking to her cousin's LLC, metadata showing falsified documents. It wasn't just receipts, it was a case. And here's the twist. While I was building it, clients began reaching out to me directly, carefully, cautiously. One asked, "Why didn't the demo reflect what we tested in UAT?" Another said, "We trusted your updates more than the exec summaries." I didn't solicit, didn't accuse, I just answered factually with whatever I could prove. Word was spreading, not because I shouted, but because silence and evidence spoke louder than spin. I wasn't just a scapegoat anymore. I was becoming a threat. If building the case felt like stacking bricks, then part 6 was the moment I realized I'd built a wall strong enough to push back. My attorney drafted the first letter. It wasn't dramatic. No threats in bold letters, no courtroom theatrics. Just cold precision, wrongful termination, retaliation, whistleblower protections. Citations of case law I didn't understand, but knew carried weight. At the bottom it listed the evidence in bullet points. Log entries, invoices, metadata, emails. Receipts so clear they didn't need adjectives. We sent it to the company's legal department. Within 24 hours, I got my first response from them since being escorted out. "We've received your correspondence. We will review." It sounded sterile, but the subtext was loud. They weren't brushing me off. They were on notice. At the same time, I filed a report through the company's internal compliance hotline. Not the kind where you expect real action, more like the checkbox version of accountability. But this time I wasn't anonymous. I attached documents, timestamps, audit trails, enough that if they ignored it, the neglect would be traceable. And then came the regulator tip. My compliance friend helped me draft it, carefully stripping out emotion. "Stick to facts," she kept saying. "Don't say sabotage. Don't say betrayal. Say procedural override. Say financial irregularities." It felt strange, almost clinical, to boil down months of abuse into bureaucratic language. But regulators don't care about your feelings. They care about the words fraud and conflict of interest. Those I used. I didn't announce any of this. Didn't tweet. Didn't post on LinkedIn. Didn't even vent to old coworkers. Silence became my weapon. While Miranda thought I was licking my wounds, I was setting chess pieces. Then came the moment I'll never forget. The client post-mortem. One of our biggest clients requested a follow-up meeting to understand what went wrong with the demo. Officially, I wasn't invited. I was no longer with the company. But the client insisted I attend as an observer since I'd been the project lead. It was the first time since my firing that I walked back into that building. My heart pounded as I swiped in with a temporary badge, like a ghost haunting the halls. The room was full, executives, client reps, Miranda at the head of the table. She looked surprised to see me, but masked it quickly, flashing that practiced smile. The meeting started with her slideshow of root causes. According to her, the failure boiled down to my poor leadership and lack of technical oversight. And then the client rep turned to me. "Do you have anything to add?" My mouth went dry. This was it. The moment. I didn't rant, didn't accuse. I simply pulled out printed logs, slid them across the table, and said, "This is the build we prepared. This is the one that was deployed. Notice the approval credentials. Notice the timestamp." The room went quiet. An exec picked up the paper, squinted, frowned. Another asked a question about the invoices. I answered factually. No drama, no anger, just receipts. and with every word, the power shifted. Miranda tried to laugh it off. "System glitch," she said, the same line she'd fed us months earlier. But this time, the clients weren't buying it. They pushed harder. They asked why an unvetted build had been used at all, why funds were going to an unfamiliar LLC, why performance memos were backdated. For once, she didn't have the room under her spell. When the meeting ended, no one said anything directly to me, but I saw it in their eyes, the cracks forming in her armor, the doubt, the suspicion, the realization that maybe, just maybe, the scapegoat had been telling the truth. I walked out of that building lighter than I'd felt in weeks, not victorious, not yet, but steady. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting. I was dictating the pace. And Miranda, she had no idea the real storm hadn't even hit yet. If part 6 was leverage, part 7 was detonation. 2 weeks after the postmortem, whispers started leaking out of the executive floor. Something about an internal review, outside auditors, compliance escalation. It wasn't official yet, but I knew what it meant. The walls were closing in. My attorney got the first confirmation. The company had retained an external firm to audit the project. "They don't do that for minor hiccups," he said. "They're protecting themselves now, not her." And he was right. The auditors didn't just look at the demo. They combed through procurement, vendor contracts, system access logs. They interviewed engineers, QA, even client liaisons. One by one, the pieces I had highlighted in yellow became anchors in their report. The swapped build? Confirmed. The Cousins LLC? Flagged for self-dealing. The backdated memo? Labeled non-compliant documentation. It was surreal. For weeks I'd been screaming silently into the void, convinced no one would ever see the truth, and now strangers in suits were validating everything I'd lived. Then came the emergency board session. I wasn't in the room, but I heard from 3 different sources how it went. Miranda tried to spin, tried to paint herself as the victim of rogue employees and miscommunication. But the logs didn't lie. The invoices didn't lie. The timeline didn't lie. By the end of the session, she was suspended pending investigation. Less than a week later, the official announcement dropped. Terminated for cause. For cause. 2 words that might not mean much to anyone outside corporate life, but inside, they're a scarlet letter. It meant no cushy severance, no golden parachute, no quiet exit. It meant her reputation was radioactive. I wish I could say I felt triumphant. Truthfully, I felt relieved, like a weight had finally lifted off my chest. For the first time in months, I slept 8 full hours without waking up in a sweat. But the story didn't stop there, because regulators had picked up my report. And they weren't just looking at her. They were looking at the company. Within days, news broke of a consent order and a hefty fine for procurement irregularities and governance failures. The press release didn't name names, but everyone inside knew where the trail led. And then the ripple effect began. Clients demanded explanations. Competitors whispered. Former employees reached out to me privately saying, "We always knew something was off. We just didn't have proof." HR, perhaps out of fear of legal exposure, quietly amended my records. Instead of terminated, my file now said separated. They sent me a check labeled revised severance, more than double the original offer, along with a written apology and a clean reference letter signed by the VP of HR. No admission of guilt, of course, but enough to show they were scared. For a moment, I just stared at the letter. It wasn't vindication, not fully, but it was proof that silence hadn't swallowed me, that Miranda's narrative hadn't become history. And the sweetest twist? A rival firm reached out. They'd been following the mess from the outside and wanted me to lead a new initiative for them. "We need someone who can survive fire," the recruiter said. I laughed for the first time in weeks. Survive fire? I'd walked through it. Miranda, the woman who once told me to mourn and never come back, was gone, and I was being invited back, not to her table, but to a better one. Karma doesn't always come fast. Sometimes it crawls. Sometimes it limps. Sometimes you think it'll never show up. But when it does, it walks right through the front door carrying receipts. The day I accepted the new role, I walked past my old office building. Not intentionally. It was on my way to meet a friend for lunch, but the sight of it stopped me cold. Through the glass doors, I saw movers carrying out boxes. At first, I thought it was just another department downsizing. Then I caught a glimpse of one box stacked high with binders, a nameplate balanced on top. Miranda's. I stood there for a moment, not smiling, not sneering, just still. It was surreal. Months earlier, she'd told me to mourn, pack, and never come back. And now here she was, reduced to cardboard and silence, carried out by strangers who didn't even know her name. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. That chapter was closed. My new job wasn't glamorous at first. Rebuilding projects rarely are. But it was honest. The leadership team was transparent. The clients respectful. The work demanding in a way that didn't drain the soul. For the first time in a long time, I could focus on solving problems instead of surviving sabotage. Some of my old teammates joined me. One by one, they found their way out of the mess and into healthier environments. We didn't talk much about Miranda, except in passing. We didn't need to. The shadow she cast had finally faded. What stayed with me wasn't the humiliation or even the revenge. It was the lesson. Betrayal in the workplace doesn't always come with warning sirens. Sometimes it creeps in quietly. A shifted deadline here, a missing credit there, a vague budget line that doesn't add up. You tell yourself it's fine, that loyalty will protect you. But loyalty without accountability is just a leash waiting to be yanked. What saved me wasn't rage, it wasn't vengeance, it was evidence. Receipts don't lie, even when people do. And when you collect them carefully, patiently, they become a shield. I'd love to say this story ended with me dancing on her downfall. It didn't. It ended with me choosing not to dance at all. Just walking away, carrying my dignity, my new opportunity, and the knowledge that silence, the right kind of silence, can be louder than any speech. Now I tell this story for one reason, because someone out there is sitting in a conference room right now, being set up, being gaslit, being told they're the failure when the truth is the opposite. If that's you, listen carefully. You're not crazy. You're not worthless. You're not alone. Document. Preserve. Wait. And when the time comes, let the facts do the talking. So yeah, that's how my boss tried to bury me with one line, and that's how the ground shifted beneath her instead. If you've made it this far, thank you. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop it in the comments. Hit like if you want more stories like this, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. It means more than you think. Because in the end, stories like these aren't just mine, they're ours.